So I have to be responsible for whatever my part was. It could be 1%, it could be 100%, 99%, it could be 5%, it could be 50-50. Like we each bring our stuff to the table. Things are caught more than taught. Like really, like if you're not living this out, like you can't teach your kids what you don't know. So if you are not living it out, you're not able to do it for them. We are not apologizing to get an apology back. We are apologizing because we messed up and we're trying to repair the rupture. And hopefully they're our kids. Now, can you imagine now in their future relationships?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Mom's Way to Wellness. I am excited to share part 2 of a conversation with Jodi Snowdon about how pivotal moments in her own life changed her approach to parenting. Jodi is an author, a speaker, and hosts the Depth podcast, which is also the name of her book, Depth, Growing Through Heartbreak to Strength. Jodi shares about how important it is to start working on ourselves as moms and different ways we can grow in self-awareness and teach our kids some practical ways to help them name their own feelings and be able to identify what they need when they are going through difficult seasons. She also reminds us that we don't need to be perfect. We will make mistakes, and as moms, we can take responsibility when the situation calls for it. You're going to be blessed by this conversation because Jodi has such a heart for moms. And all of the ways to connect with Jodi will be in a link in the show notes. So let's get into part 2 of this conversation. All right. Well, welcome again to Mom's Way to Wellness. Jodi, it's so good to have you here. Thank you for being with us again.
Yeah, it's good to be back. Round 2.
Yes, we are having a second part of the conversation because in part 1, we talked primarily about how we carry grief and heartbreak and grow in depth as women, as moms. But today we're going to talk a little bit about how that reflects in our parenting. And so I so much appreciate your perspective on parenting, especially since you've launched some kids into college. Can you share with the audience in case they didn't listen to the previous episode, which please go back and listen if you didn't. But can you share a little bit about yourself with our audience again?
Yeah. So I'm a mom of 2. One just graduated college and one just graduated high school and just entered college. So I'm an empty nester, which is a really different stage of motherhood than I've ever been in. So I'm adjusting. It's so funny because the phone, I felt it like my Fitbit going off and it's my son calling. How funny is that? So how ironic, just the perfect timing. So they do still reach out to you when they go away to college. It's beautiful. I am a podcaster, a speaker, a writer. I love to help people going through grief. I walk through a divorce, a miscarriage, a good friend passing to cancer, and all of those things. God used that time to grow me, to develop my character, but also to grow my roots deeper in Him. And just the most trying time of my life was the most I grew in my faith, So I just feel like I have a message to share to help those that are going through grief, but I primarily love to help moms because I was a mom by myself, and it's with my kids. I was a single mom for 10 years and over 10 years. And so, I wanted to help them. I wanted them to learn things that I hadn't learned when I was growing up. And just, the divorce was the catalyst that helped me learn so much about myself, which then I turned and hopefully shared that with my kids, So that's a little bit about me.
Well, I appreciate that you sharing that with us, with our audience, because you know what? A lot of our situations, they shape our role in how we parent our kids, right? And it goes by so fast. I'm sure it feels like the blink of an eye.
Yeah. I have a funny thing to share about that because when you bring your baby home, you have 936 weeks. Like it seems like a long time, but if you can do it in weeks, that's like almost 1,000 marbles. So this guy came to our church, he put 1,000 marbles in a jar and he stood up on stage and was talking about the time with our kids. And then he just pick up a handful of marbles and throw them and say, they're 4, they're 5. And we all just sat there like, oh my gosh, it happens that fast. There's that saying that the days are long, but the years are short. The years just fly by, right? Even though the days are super long. And I remember as a mom, sometimes that time from nap to bedtime, like to dinner and bedtime, it seemed like that was an eternity. But once now I look back and think, I would just kill to be able to go back into that and sit in that moment more. But he then got to 200 marbles in the jar. And he's like, this is how many marbles you have when they start high school. mind blowing, right? 200 marbles. And so my oldest was a sophomore at that point. I'm like, I have 150 marbles. My view of time with my kids just like shifted in such a beautiful way. It actually happened before that, but that was such a powerful visual. But my divorce, when you have your kids all the time forever, like you don't really see it as precious, but now I have to share my time with my kids. It's no longer I have them 100% of their time. And time just looked different. It was like something to be guarded, like a jewel. Like time needs to be looked at that way with you and your kids. Now, that doesn't mean every season we love. Let's keep it real. But we need to look at it as how can I guard? How can I be intentional in those weeks, those marbles, each week, what's one thing you're doing to be intentional with your kids? And that doesn't mean it has to be something huge. It could just be one-on-one time or teaching them a skill or just loving on them and having like snuggles longer in bed or, whatever that looks like. But are we being intentional? Or are we just kind of wishing the day would just quickly go by and the next day, because sometimes mothering is like the most rewarding job, but the hardest job all at the same time.
It is. It really is. That's such a powerful visual. And I guess I don't know if you know this about me, but I have a 29-year-old, a 28-year-old, and a 15-year-old. And so my 15-year-old is in her
starting high school.
Yep, she just started high school, and I'm just a whole different parent. I think she has just a more patient parent, and I'm a grandma too. So I get to enjoy.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So I get to enjoy all these things. And when they get into high school, we could think, oh no, I only have 4 years, right? Or right now, I pretty much only have almost 3.5 years, but really I've had 15 years. This is just part of the story, right? So I love how you talk about that when you had to share your time, it became more precious. It became something to guard, right? Our situations just frame things a little bit differently. So can you tell us about how things changed in your parenting when you began your grief journey, like after your divorce or during your divorce?
Yes. So I was like growing leaps and bounds. I was in counseling and I was just trying to better understand myself, becoming more self-aware. I really don't think I had self-awareness about myself until my divorce, which is super sad. So I was 38 when I got divorced and the kids were like 6 and 10 and they quickly turned 7 and 11 within a couple months. And so I just remember telling them like, I'm going to teach you guys some of these things I'm learning in counseling. They started going to counseling. They were learning things. And so much of that is what I want to share today because it changed the trajectory of my role as mom and just the relationship I have with my boys. So one of the things was apologizing. So I grew up in a home where it was, I'm sorry, but, and then they would say all these things that we did that caused them to be frustrated with us. And it was like, that's not an apology. And that's how I used to apologize. I'm sorry, but, and it was the blame. And honestly, looking back now, like I didn't know any better. I mean, I know that sounds like an excuse, but then all of a sudden it was like, wait a minute, that's not a real apology. An apology is I'm sorry. And then you own your part. So I like to say my response is my responsibility. So I have to be responsible for whatever my part was. It could be 1%, it could be 100%, 99%, it could be 5%, it could be 50-50. Like we each bring our stuff to the table. So I remember a time with my kids, and I'm going to tell this story not to like, it's what I did was wrong. And so do not try this method at home, but I want to give you an example of how to apologize correctly, because I think not everyone repairs ruptures with their kids. And I wish we could say we perfect parents and we're never going to mess up, but we are going to mess up. And how are we going back in and fixing that mistake? So I'm going to hold up this water bottle as my visual. So I was in the car with my kids and one of these was sitting in the front seat about halfway full like this. And the kids were just arguing. And they were arguing. And if you have older kids, like the car is just fertile ground for the arguing, the one touching the kid in the back. And all of a sudden I was just like, kids, stop. Like I kept saying, please stop, please stop. And I was really sweet. And then all of a sudden it's like, stop, or I'm going to pour this water bottle over one of your heads. Now, not a great technique. I don't recommend it, but they didn't stop. So what did I do? Don't do this. Not a good idea. Don't do this. But I poured not the whole bottle, but like a couple of dribbles over the one in the front. Oh, the one in the back's laughing. The one in the front's crying. And I'm just like, this did not bring peace into the car. This brought even more upheaval. And it wasn't respectful. I shouldn't have done it, but I had hit my wall. We as moms hit our walls. So we get home, they go upstairs. And now I'm like, they were not listening. So I could do the whole blame. But I've learned now that I have a responsibility. I did something I should not have done. That was not respectful. So I brought the boys down and I said, I am sorry. My response is my responsibility. And I did not respond well to you in the car. Will you forgive me for pouring water over your head and showing you disrespect? Because you deserve to be treated with respect. And that was not respectful. Okay. Owned my part. That was mine to own. Now you might say, well, wait a minute. The kids had a part. They weren't, but you know what? Your job's not to own their part. They have to own their part. So you own yours and then you say nothing. I did this at a speaking engagement. I had a mom say to me, but when do you go back and tell, make them own theirs? I'm like, not right away. Because if you do it immediately, they're going to think you're apologizing just to get an apology. And that's not really what we want. We want them to be authentic in their apology. So that night I didn't do anything else. We had dinner, they were really sweet. They said, yes, we forgive you. And then they took off that night at bedtime, which I always think bedtime, they always share more, whether it's telling me something they did that they shouldn't have done or just being more real and authentic. And one of them said, Mom, we're really sorry for being in the car and not listening and just kept antagonizing. They didn't say antagonize because that's the word I would use, but for not, I forget the word they use, but for bickering or whatever. And I said, thank you for owning your part, so they did eventually get there. Now, let's say they never did. Well, maybe the next day I'd say, hey, you remember that time in the car where Mom totally messed up? Did you have a part? And maybe that's when I do it, like a whole day later where they don't think, or even that evening where it wasn't within an hour of my apology, because we are not apologizing to get an apology back. We are apologizing because we messed up and we're trying to repair the rupture. And hopefully there are kids. Now, can you imagine now in their future relationships, they're going to be able to implement this? Like, huge. So that was one of my big growth steps. And I just think, I don't know, was this modeled for you? If you ask people like, did your parents apologize? Like most people say no, right?
No. What was modeled for me was the silent treatment or yelling. And, and I understand that we grow up and we look at the way that we were parented and we say they did the best they could with what they had.
Correct.
And we understand that. And at the same time, we're still emotionally formed by those experiences, right? And so it takes repair for us too, like within ourselves, to then be able to have the patience to go in. And I wish I had known how to apologize or even accept an apology way better when my oldest was in middle school. That's why I've grown in my parenting, and we see the way that it shapes our kids differently when they're adults, right? When they don't have to listen anymore, they don't have to come over and visit, they don't have to abide by our rules, right? They're their own people. We were growing individual humans the whole time.
Yes.
And maybe when they were little, if we focused more on behavior that we thought was right versus wrong, then we missed some points. So I love you sharing that vulnerability. I'm picturing the water bottle, but at the same time, like, that's powerful. It's powerful that when you owned your part, it wasn't about now is a teachable moment. Right? Like you're modeling something for them and for them to learn, instead of us sitting down as parents sometimes and lecturing, right? If we're the only ones talking, yes, like we think they're listening, but they're not listening. Yeah. They're probably zoning out. So yes,
things are caught more than taught. Things are caught more than taught. They really, like, if you're not living this out, like you can't teach your kids what you don't know. So if you are not living it out, you're not able to do it for them. So the book that started me on this whole trajectory was How We Love Our Kids. Have you read this one by Mylene and Kay Yurkovich?
I have not, but I'm going to add it to my list. Okay. Thank you.
Oh, life-changing book, friends. How We Love Our... You can see mine's all weathered and tethered because I read so much of it by Mylene and Kay Yurkovich. And so what they say is for you to become a better parent, it's one small change in you makes you a better parent. So it's, so many times you say, well, if the kids would just listen, or if they wouldn't do this. And that's not the whole point of the book. The whole book is what can you change in you? Like, where's something that you're missing the mark that you could be then a better parent? So you're going back and identifying the triggers because they know how to push your buttons. And they are going to push them. And how are you going to react? And so it's going back and learning. Again, it's so much about you focusing on the self-awareness and so that you can then model that. Because again, like you said, they're going to be adults and you want to have shown them the way they can be. And I even remember recently talking to my oldest son, we went to lunch and bringing up some of this stuff and, him sharing it. He was older. He was in fifth or sixth grade when it all happened. And so, I had done it wrong for a long time with him, so he remembers that. Whereas my youngest one, maybe not so much. And so it's just good. It's humbling. It's humbling. And when we bring up what we did, it's not to like make us feel bad or even our parents. Like I love my mom and dad so much. I never said anything negative to them about them not being able to teach me emotional literacy. I don't think that was a thing back then. And they can't teach what they didn't know. So it's just those self-awareness. So for me to know that wasn't something I learned. So that's, what I'm saying. So it's not like you're reading, like when they have you read this book, they have you kind of go back and trace things in your childhood. It's not so you can go and like, say anything negative to your parents. It's about you learning about you to connect the dots. Why am I like this? Why do I stuff? Why do I withdraw? Why do I pursue? Why, we all do different things in conflicts. Some people explode and pursue, some people withdraw and stuff. Why? And it's just learning about yourself.
Right. It doesn't sound like, yes, it doesn't sound like it's about blaming, right? And even if you have those conversations, right? If we come back to our parents and have those conversations, maybe sometimes it's just about understanding, but not necessarily, I guess, there's this cancel culture now. It's not about canceling our parents.
Oh, no, don't cancel anyone. Yes.
Right.
Well, and it's interesting because like my kids were telling me some stuff and it was hard to hear some of it at times. Like, oh yeah, but you know what? That's how we grow. And I said, I'm really sorry. My response is my responsibility. I really tried to implement that. Maybe it took me longer to implement it than I thought. Like I thought I had really started to pick it up. But again, change takes time and we sometimes revolt back to our old hard habits. And so I just want you to give yourself grace, but don't stay stuck in your bad negative patterns. Like, what do you need to work on you? Not about your kids. Now, obviously, our kids are not perfect little angels. I love my boys, but they messed up too. But that's not mine to own. I need to teach them how to do it, but I need to just own so that's phrase, my response is my responsibility, became life-changing our home. And it's kind of funny, Ida, because I taught it to my boys and I taught them that your response is your responsibility. And then one time I blew it and I got really angry. And one of them said to me, Mom, your response is your responsibility. And that moment where you're you're so proud that your child knows that, but then you're like, I don't want to hear that right now. It was one of those moments where like, okay, they know that. Like, that's cool. They now have that in their, tool belt. Like if we think about, they can pull that out when they need to use it. But it's really humbling when you're like, ooh, I'm not modeling it right now, obviously. So they're having to remind me, it's the humble pie. So don't dismiss that. Like, friends, repair the rupture. It is such a beautiful thing. And, when I messed up, like, I don't expect you to be perfect either, sweetie, to your children. Like, that's freeing, right? We don't expect perfection. And if we mess up, we're going to repair it. I just think that's powerful.
Yes, repairing that rupture. It is so important. And yeah, sometimes it's hard to have some humble pie in the moment. Maybe time or place, it might be hard to receive it, but they definitely learned it, right? They definitely took it in, and it became. Did it become a mantra for them?
Yeah, it did. It did. And it's actually a mantra I live by. So I have to stop myself. So many times I can feel emotion coming up because for so many years I would just let myself have it out. And sometimes that feels good. Let's keep it real. They're like, just let it all out. But that's not helpful to anyone around you. So then instead it was identifying the emotion underneath. Like I shared in the last episode, what's behind the anger? Is it feeling hurt? Is it fear? Is it disappointment? Those are the primary emotions we need to address and find a way to deal with them. So really naming your feelings is important. So that's kind of my second thing. I love to encourage moms to help. First of all, you have to learn how to name your feelings. Like if you don't know how to name yours, you can't teach your kids how to do it. But this was a tool. Now I can take zero credit for it. It was my kids' counselor's tool, but I share it with so many people. And it's just this aha moment. This light bulb goes off. It is so powerful. So what you need to do is you got to go to Lowe's or Home Depot and get these 3 color swatch things. Okay. So if you're not watching, what it is it's like a light shade of red, a medium shade of red, and then a dark shade of red. So I usually do red and blue. You can do other emotions, but these are the 2 that I start with. So then you say to your children, how do you feel when you're just slightly mad? And that goes in this section. So maybe it's annoyed, frustrated. That's a way to express like, I'm just a little annoyed. I'm a little hurt, or I'm a little frustrated, I'm a little mad. Then the middle one, angry, mad, that's that kind of like that emotion. Well, the deep red is the most important. What do you feel when you're really mad? Now, for one of my kids, it was enraged. Oh, that's a really good word. So we wrote it on his. I actually have my kids' ones here. I'm going to show you.
I love the
So we have
visual. I love the
yeah,
visual.
annoyed, mad, enraged. Okay, so that was one. And then the other one was in charged. The high word was charged. And here's the thing, he was charged. I mean, he was like electric, right? That was such a good word for him. When he wrote that, I'm like, perfect. Well, you need to remember whose word goes with what kid. Okay. So one day, my one who was charged started having the deep red. And so what you do is you ask him, like, what shade of red are you feeling? And he's like, deep red, So then I'm like, oh, you're enraged. And he's like, that's brother's word. I was like, oh, what was the one you picked? And oh, friends, you got to learn what their word is. But when you can identify how they're feeling and put a word to it, it's huge because it connects it. Then what do you need from me? Because we want them to know that getting past the emotion is a relationship, not a go to something else. Like, I'm going to go eat something, because that could turn into something negative. Or because then that people, when they're older, I'm going to go drink something. Like, that's going to take the pain away. Or, we want them to move to people for their what's the word I'm looking,
Some
not
sort
freedom,
of
but
like some sort of resolution.
relief.
Relief.
Yeah,
Yes.
relief. That's the word. It was just not coming to me. Thank you for your help. But you guys, this is so powerful, because you can say to them, what shade are you feeling? And it's like a way to put words to their emotion, because we do feel it at different levels, right? One day I could just be super annoyed. Next day I'm like, I'm mad. And then another day I'm like, I'm, going to blow my top. So I'm enraged, or whatever word they pick. So you could do one for yourself, and then you could teach your kids. Now, blue is sadness. And this is really important with kids, because sometimes kids will move to depressed. So we had put depressed on the dark blue. Let me show you the one we did. So this is back when I did it with them, they were littler swatches. These are the ones I find now. So we had down. I just feel down. Maybe that's just like, I'm not quite myself. I feel down. That's the light blue. Sad. I feel sad. Dark blue, I'm depressed. So when you see your child and you say, what shade of blue do you feel? If they say depressed, then you better be aware that means they are really down and sad and depressed. Like, enter into it with them. If I'm just down, maybe all they need is, a hug. Maybe they need more than a hug. Maybe they need to go to counseling. You just have to, you start learning your kids' language, but it is a way to put words to their feelings and get them to start learning this language. Because when they are older, they're not going to learn this, right? Teenagers are like, what am I doing? But if you could do this elementary, I mean, you could still do it with older. You could start at any time. Better than never. But I did this in elementary school, and it just gives them words for how they're feeling. And then we did like yellow for happy, and they put, because you could always do it for the other emotions, the happy ones. You don't always have to just do negative. But green could be jealous. I mean, you could do whatever you want. There's so many color swatches out there. Go to town. But I think angry and sad are the two that most kids don't know how to deal with it. They don't know how to process it, or they just don't know how to manage it. And we don't. I mean, I did it for years. Let's keep it real. Managing the overwhelm. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I love the way that you use this tool, right? I love the way that you are open about even going to counseling and even addressing that our kids have emotions too, right? That their emotions can be as heavy as ours. What might be limited sometimes is their resources, their ability to identify, to name, to find relief, because they can't maybe find the words to express it, right? Maybe they don't have access. Like, sometimes I think I recommend movement too, right? So like, if I like a good run or a walk, but sometimes depending on where you live or the time of year it is, your kid doesn't have access to go out and go for a run or go for a walk, right? They can only maybe go to the room to be alone. So I love that you gave them tools, right? That you gave them resources that they could utilize. And you're right, we can start them at any time, but because you started them at a time of transition in your life, how much did that grow into becoming somewhat normal for all of you to be able to express how you were feeling with each other?
Well, it's like a new language. I mean, we just talked about it all the time. And to the point where my older one was like, enough about this sometimes. Like, I don't want to tell you how I feel. I'm just like, it was almost maybe too much for him. The younger one loved it but I do think it was something I never knew. Like, we would watch a movie and I would pause it and say, no one's entering into her pain. Do you see her crying? Like, no one's seen her that she needs. And they'd be like, Mom, just play the movie. I was like, no, we're going to stop and we're going to talk about it. And it was like, so maybe I took it excessive, but I think it was the first time I was having these big aha moments of like, there's someone that needs comfort, there's someone that and so sometimes she'd have you write on the back, like, what do they need at each thing? So my sweet little one would be like, I need a cookie. I'm like, okay, if that helps with a hug and a cookie, it's not always food because you don't want it to be a negative thing, but sometimes it's my older one. Sometimes like, I just need space. Like, I need you to just let me do this by myself. Okay. So give them to, especially then they're older, they might not want you like, right on top of them. And like you said, maybe you need to go out and be active. There's so many things now with like the breathing and the senses, the five senses, none of that we did at the time because that's relatively new, but so much since then. And there's a book, again, I love to recommend books because as you clearly see behind me, I'm a huge reader, but there's a book, Raising Emotionally Strong Boys. Here, let me grab it. It's over here. It looks like this. Have you read this one?
I
David
have not,
Thomas.
but I have girls.
You have girls. So again, you have girls. But this, I think, because a lot of times I think parents sometimes won't teach their boys emotional stuff. They'll think, oh, that's more for a girl. But you guys, boys have emotions. And so in here, though, he gives so many neat things. And again, you could apply it to girls, but the breathing, the going outside. So I just remember that time when I read it, my sons were way older. I wish I had it when they were little. I kept telling them, I wish I had this book when we were going through the divorce. But they were probably middle school and high school, or even high school and college at that point. And so I just remember saying to my son, we went for a walk and shoulder to shoulder time. So girls love to look at you and talk to you, like sit across the table and talk, but boys like shoulder to shoulder time. So we would go for walks or sit next to each other in the car and talk. Like, that's even your husbands, if you're listening and you're married, like sitting next to them and talking to them straight to face, that can be like intimidating at times. So we just went for a walk. And I just remember saying to my son, like, hey, these were some tools that he mentioned, like, are any of these helpful to you? And we had a great talk. It wasn't like me trying to parent him at that point. He was an adult or about to be an adult. And so it's just me giving him more tools. Because see, you can never have enough tools in your tool belt. I think we should always be growing and learning more tools, which is why I love to read these kind of books all the time. And what can I do better for me? We never arrive. And if someone's like, oh, I don't need it anymore, okay, you totally need it because you think you've arrived and you never arrive, So, but yeah, I do think the breathing is huge. Also, like, there's this stuff about grounding yourself and the five senses. Go out and what do you feel? What do you smell? What do you see? And what's interesting is just recently I read in Matthew where Jesus says, look at the birds. Like, he's telling us to use our senses, look at the birds. And sometimes there's times that we need to get out of what we're feeling and use our senses to see what's around us. That doesn't always help, but I just think that that's interesting that he used that word, look. So there's so many tools out there. So I guess I'd say start with one, depending on the age of your kid or for you, let's start with you. If you don't know how to do this, you need to start with you. Get some colored swatches or just start writing out how you're feeling. Maybe you name a feeling. The How We Love website has like feeling words and they go really deep. So again, as an adult, we want to like, what do you mean in angry? There's like 12 different choices. So like, which word is the one you're feeling? And it's so good to like be able to do that. And again, that's too much for your kids. If they're preschoolers, I just do like red, yellow, blue, mad, sad, glad. Just start with those. And you could do like a little paper plate. They could go touch the plate if they can't speak yet, or you can teach them those words. You're just giving them language because they're going to have days they're mad. And, temper tantrums, that's them being mad. They can't figure out what they want to say. And so they're mad. So using that language. Again, teenagers sometimes have their own little temper tantrum that seems like almost like a toddler. And it's just, they don't know how to deal with these. They don't know how to express the emotion they're feeling. Anytime you can give them tools for that, it's going to be helpful. Another lady I had on the podcast, this book is so cute because it goes with how like phones and stuff, it's called Managing Your Emojis. And so the emojis is kind of how they feel, because let's keep it real. Kids can identify the emoji they feel. So it's how do you manage them? And it's a devotional. So there's a lot out there. So you can start somewhere. Like, what's one action step? Like, don't try them all. You're going to be exhausted, but one thing and do that for 2 months. I say do it for more than a month because really build that as habit, then add another thing in. 6 months 2 months each time, that's a year. Think about 6 new things you can start. Or maybe you just do one for 3 or 4 months and, whatever it takes. It's like your kids deserve to have a mom and an adult in the house that can understand them. And you have to be able to learn these things so you can enter, because understanding and empathy is the best gift you can give your kid. That is the best gift you can give your kid.
Yes, I love that, because all of those resources that you're sharing, and even the example of you walking with your son, it sounds like you approached it with curiosity, right? Where you were asking
Yes.
him. And so, we can always be curious with our kids.
Yes, especially the ages of our kids, right? Because let's keep it real. You and I are in an age now where our kids are not wanting us to sit there and go, treat them like they're a child, right? So it's like entering into it as an adult and saying, hey, could this be helpful? This is what I'm reading, and we could still instruct them and give them tools. It doesn't mean they had to learn those. Like if you're sitting there right now going, my kids are grown and I messed up, like, no blame. It's never too late. Start with your grandkids, start with your kids and say, hey, I'm learning some new things. I just want to tell you about it. Maybe it's something, and maybe own it. I'm sorry, I didn't teach this to you when you were younger. You're not trying to make them, no guilt on yourself, but if you feel like you want to let them know, like I always say, I wish I had learned this younger. I wish I had learned it younger so I could have started when they were little. Because think about it, like, wow, if you've got little ones right now, preschoolers or elementary low, like just think about what gift you're giving them. This is going to help all future relationships, boyfriend, girlfriends, spouses when they get married, right? Kids when they're a parent. Like it's going to be, the trajectory is beautiful. And again, you can't teach what you don't know. You cannot teach something to your child if you don't already know how to implement and do it in your own life. And that's the self-awareness piece where you have to kind of stop and go, where can I grow? And it's like that tree with the deep roots. We are constantly wanting to grow deep. And sometimes our hard times in life are God's way of growing our character. Sometimes we can just voluntarily say, I'm going to work on myself. Let's keep it real. Most people wait till something's happened and then they think, oh, I need to, fix this or something. And then they work on themselves. But what if you could just model it in such a beautiful way? So these are some of the things that have helped me and my kids.
I appreciate that so much. And when we do the hard work of figuring out how we can work on ourselves, sometimes I love that you're including that it's the church, because you shared in the other episode how you serve in ministry, right?
Yes, yes.
It's finding community. And I so much appreciate that counseling was part of your journey, right? That sometimes it does need to be, with someone who's a professional in that area. Sometimes they've learned how to sit with us in a way that they could pull out and help us to understand and then help us understand how we're bringing that into our parenting.
It was life-changing for me. And then my kids' counselor was life-changing too, to help me enter into, we're walking through this divorce as a family and it was really hard for the kids. So I definitely say 100% counseling if you can afford it, or they have things at churches that are, discount or free. Just anytime you can get some ways to help, I think it's huge. Yeah, for sure.
What's one message that you would like to encourage a younger mom with before we wrap up?
Well, I'd say when I go and speak and I say, what I wish I would have known when I was your age sitting there is it's okay not to be perfect. Let go of perfection. Like you guys, let go of comparison. You're going to get so stuck. There's always going to be someone that does it better. And there's always going to be someone that you do it better than. And so you're either going to get prideful or you're going to feel horrible about yourself. And neither one is helpful. So instead, be vulnerable. See, vulnerability is not the same. When we compare, it's, oh, I wish I was more like them. But instead, if we're just vulnerable, these are my struggles. This is where I have a hard time. Like I have an anger issue. I said, I don't want to admit that, but I did for a long time. And I still easily can jump right back into it, but I am a much healthier version of myself and I don't. But it's something that is still a struggle if I let myself just, go off. Like I can easily jump back into that negative self. So maybe that's not you. Maybe yours is something else, but be vulnerable. And you don't have to share it to everyone, but who's one other trusted friend that you can tell this to? So I like to think of it as the tree as the deep roots, but when I went to the sequoias in California, they're the tallest trees in the world. And I thought, oh, they're going to have the deepest roots. And the guy's like, they don't. They only go about 5 to 6 feet, but then they go wide and they interlock tree roots with the trees around them. And it was this powerful moment in time where I realized we have to have that depth, that deep rooted time with God. That's our hidden time with just the Lord. But we have to interlock tree roots with friends around us. And that involves not comparing and not looking at them and wishing you had what they have, but being vulnerable and just saying, can you come alongside and help me? Or if you're at a day where like you're just ready to pull your hair out, because, mothering is hard, you could call them and they're going to give you beautiful faith-filled wisdom, not just like go do something that you shouldn't do. They're going to like give you a scripture verse or encouragement. So definitely, I would say that's what I would tell a young mom.
I think that's beautiful advice. And
thank you.
Yes. Can you tell our listeners how to connect with you and where to find you?
Yes. So I'm at jodisnowdon.com. I'm going to hold up my book just so that you can see my name. So it's The Tree with the Deep Roots, and it's JODISNOWDON.com. And there's lots of resources there for moms as well as just women going through hard things. But I have a passion for moms. And so definitely, if you go ahead and sign up to get my newsletter, there's some free resources that are for moms, like special prayers to pray over your son or daughter and other things that I love to share. So I want to encourage you on in your journey as a mom. Be intentional. Yes, but don't let go of perfection. You're never going to be perfect.
Thank you so much, Jodi, for sharing your message with us. And I mentioned it in the other interview, but I am reading your book and I'm loving it. And I so appreciate your passion for moms and your willingness to be so vulnerable in your book and to share your message with other moms in any way that you can. So thank you again for being with us on the show today. I really appreciate you and your ministry. Thank you.
Thank you for your sweet words. They mean a lot to me. It was a joy, Ida. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to today's episode. Please subscribe and leave a review. This will help others find the show. If you would like to receive additional resources on motherhood and wellness, you can join my community by subscribing to my email list at idamaravillas.com. Remember, wellness is possible one step at a time.